So it's late in the afternoon. I'm going to be as brief as I can and walk through a little bit about the reasons that repurposing resources is so important for guided pathways implementation and design. So why does it matter? I think one of the things that we've seen nationally is that colleges that are able to achieve high and improving levels of student success have cultures that support that. And culture we often think of as something that's hard to define, right? It's sort of, you know it when you see it. But in fact, cultures are created, and one way cultures are created is that people are intentionally moving resources and aligning them with goals. And resources are not just money in those circumstances. There are lots of other things. There are lots of ways we spend our time. And in the guided pathways context, we're going to need to repurpose resources for a couple of things that pretty clearly will need to be done differently. So it's pretty clear that the advising structures we have and the amount of time we spent advising and how we do that, both through human forms and technology, probably are not up to the task of helping students enter a path and helping them stay on a path. So in just very tangible terms, we're going to need more resources for advising. In most places that have implemented guided pathways, they find that to be true. But it's also true that faculty need time to build the pathways. You've got to clarify the path, and that is fundamentally a faculty task. And thinking about faculty time and how that's going to be found to do the hard work of clarifying the paths matters. There's a second reason that it matters so much, and that is that people need to feel supported in the work. I can't tell you the number of colleges I've gone to where administrators believe that they've set a new tone, and you meet with faculty and staff and they say, you know, I don't really believe that we're going to be given the resources and the time to do the work, so I'm not going to change my behavior in essence, right? It's really hard to invest yourself in change if you don't believe that it will be supported. So the question is, where does that time and money and other resources come from? And there's a final reason, and that's really the purpose of our conversation, just the opening comments I want to make today, and that is that you have existing structures. You have existing incentive systems. They're often aligned to having people enroll at the front end, right? The enrollment of new students, but not very well aligned to other things that you may care about. And so when thinking about resource allocation, if we simply layer more resources on top, and boy, when I heard $150 million, I'm sure all of your eyes lit up, right? Let's see, 150 divided by 113.
Divided by 5.
We all get $1 million plus, right? $1.5 million we can do this with. If you think that way, this will not work. You will end up 4 years from now not having enough to show for the work. So I really want to talk about the realignment of resources as something that can be accomplished, and how do we think about it? So one thing to do as each of you go back to your campus is to do some inventory of resources. What are the resources, practices, and incentives you have right now in place that may be misaligned with the goals of guided pathways? So consider the time that faculty, staff, and students are spending on various activities. Committee meetings is an example. How many committees do you have right now? What do the agendas look like? How many people have been in a committee meeting in the last 3 months and came out saying, boy, was that a waste of time? All right, well, that's a resource right there. That's a resource, and not only is that a resource of time, that's a resource of your energy, because you feel that the college is not supporting you to do what matters. So think about committee meetings. What about regular reports that you get? What about those of you, anybody here deliver a report that you're not sure really gets used by anybody? Hey, that's a resource. Think about that. And think about the people, anybody get a report that they just put in the drawer or leave on the computer on the internet? So think about that, right? This is a resource. It's time that is being spent on these things. And what about how we assess advising? At Everett Community College in Washington State, they realized that they cared a lot about transfer, and they never assessed whether students had found a major or had picked a transfer destination. They weren't assessing their advising in a way that helped them figure out whether students were going to successfully transfer. So what did they do? They said by the end of the third quarter, our goal is that every student who intends to transfer has chosen an area of study, a meta major or a major, and a single transfer destination. That's their preference. And that it's real. It's not just what was written down on financial aid forms for the purposes of getting financial aid. So they set that goal, and they started assessing, advising according to that. Your assessment processes really matter. So these are the kinds of things that you can reassess, and you can do your own inventory. How are students spending their hours? Student hours are, in fact, important. And one of the things we have with our scheduling, often outside of the structured, clarified paths, are students sort of wandering from course to course, not knowing whether they're going to get their courses. One of the things guided pathways can do is help you structure things so that you can start to think about scheduling a more limited set of courses so that students actually have the courses available. So, let's imagine that your goal is to get as many students to complete a credential of no more than 66 credits, 10% more, in no more than 3 calendar years. Not every student will get there, but let's say you've set a goal that's aligned to that. And let's say you've adopted the guided pathways strategy, and I'm going to leave the ensuring learning alone, only because for the purposes of this exercise it matters, but just the first 3 pillars here. You've adopted building clear pathways, getting students on the pathway, and helping students stay on the pathway. Given that goal, I asked my colleagues who have been doing guided pathways work across the country, what are the 10 stupidest things that colleges do? And that sounds pejorative. And maybe it is. This is actually an exercise that a college leader I know engages in. And one thing I will tell you, and I mentioned this earlier, this is the way people are talking about it. Gosh, if we cared about students finishing on time, this isn't a very smart thing to do. Going through this exercise on your campus can help surface those issues. Again, the frontline people will help you figure out where your resources are misaligned. You all raised your hands when I asked the questions about reports and committees. Get people to talk about it. So what are the 10 stupidest things? Well, one is we place students through multi-course developmental sequences so that most earn between 0 and 6 credits during their first year. If you care about students getting through in the 3 years and they're not getting any credits in the first year, guess what? Not a very smart thing to do. So what can be changed? Shift more first-year credits to credit bearing from developmental. That's a goal. How do you do that? Well, think about revamping placement policies, implementing co-requisite remediation. For those of you who have not seen what Tennessee has done at scale on co-requisite remediation, I was skeptical when this came out. The results are phenomenal. So I would really counsel you to take a look at that. So, second dumbest thing that colleges are doing, that they've identified and that my colleagues have identified, is designing and offering professional development that's disconnected from college-wide student success goals. First come, first served, discipline-based, then we run out of money, wait till next semester. Right? Sound familiar? What can you do? Well, maybe centralize some of the professional development to and align it to college-wide student success goals. Is there somebody who's thinking about guided pathways, the professional development needed, and there's a pot of money to think about what's needed? Third dumbest thing. I only will get to 6. I'm going to leave it to you to come up with the other 4 back on your campuses. Design systems, processes, and reports that reflect enrollment targets and emphasize recruitment and enrollment and include no reference to progression and graduation. Those are in separate reports. When Sandy Shugart arrived at Valencia College in the early 2000s, he realized this is what was happening, and he called IR and he said, for 1 year, you may not give anybody an enrollment report. If we want them to shift their focus, we've got to kill enrollment as the significant goal. Pretty astonishing way of thinking about this. Remove an incentive to create one. So think about all the places where recruitment and enrollment are discussed and ask yourself the question whether progression and graduation are actually discussed in those same contexts for everybody. Allow students to register for courses in their first year without discussing with anybody what programs of study match their interests and goals, as well as regional labor market needs, right? We want them to fulfill their goals, but we also want them to have family-sustaining wages when they graduate. So what could be changed? Well, build clear pathways. Emphasize processes that help students connect to purpose right at the front door. Think about that front door process. 2 more. Invest in expensive technology to support student advising without first revamping staff practices and institutional processes for supporting students from entry through completion. What's your goal in student advising? It's to get students to enter the path, stay on the path, and ensure that they're learning. What are the processes, the business processes, the human processes needed to do that? So if you ask yourself that question, and then you map out the information needed for everybody along that pathway, right? So you now know what everybody needs in order to do their job and get the information to students and have the information they need. Then you can identify gaps in the information and think about the technology systems that you need. But if you haven't done this work first, the country is littered with technology solutions that are really appealing, but aren't being used because people don't do that work first. And they don't really know how they can adopt the power. These are powerful systems. I get the appeal of taking them on. But if you don't know what you're trying to do and what information you need versus what you already have, it's going to be hard to use those systems well. Finally, send students hundreds of emails from different divisions and departments with no prioritization. So if you're a student and you get 800 emails in the first few weeks, and buried in there is the one that says, you didn't quite fill out your financial aid form right, guess what happens to that piece of information? Is that more important than joining the lacrosse club? I don't know. I mean, pardon me if I've offended any lacrosse players here, but you get the idea here. So we do this, and I will tell you that as you do this work, when you're working harder to get students on the path, stay on the path, you're going to democratize, and you have a democratized system for communicating with students. You're going to develop all kinds of real interests people will have in communicating with students. Hugely important. And they're going to say, cue this one up, because I want to do my job. But if you don't have some centralized way of understanding what students are getting and monitor that, it's going to be a tragedy of the commons problem, right? Too much information is floating out there, and therefore none of the information gets through. So streamline communications by inventorying what's happening, prioritizing, and then redesigning the system. So I will stop there and introduce the panel to talk a little bit about how they've thought about the prioritization of resources and the repurposing of resources. To your left, starting to your left, is Glenn Roquemore, who will start. He's the president of Irvine Valley College. And Ransford is a trustee at Glendale Community College. And then at the end is Jennifer Johnson, a professor here at Bakersfield. So why don't we start with Glenn?
All right. Okay, Josh, thank you very much. It's really such a pleasure being one of the 3 California colleges that's on the AACC program to be here to talk a little bit about our journey. But first of all, I want to thank Sonia and Bakersfield College for hosting this. This has been a very rich and informative day. But also to mention our chancellor and the words that he had for us. I think they cannot be repeated enough. His passion is incredible. His message is just right on target. Lastly, is anybody here from Porterville College? I don't see a hand. Well, I have an AA degree from Porterville College, just up the road there a little bit. So that was back in 1972. Don't do the math. Don't do the math. Well, so we had a little bit of a different journey than what all of you will face on the California pathways. And part of that came from the role of the president, and that is being involved nationally with the AACC for really quite a long time. Started on one of the commissions there, and now on the President's Advisory Council. So with that, I was there when the 21st Century Commission on Community Colleges was meeting, Reclaiming the Dream, the implementation manual, and was right with Walter Bumpus when that was all being discussed. So with that, I became informed, and very informed about what that new, not initiative we're calling it, but actually our renaissance here as we move forward, what all of that meant and what we really needed to do. But I was challenged in a way because I never for a moment, here we go with this gadget. Let's see if I can get it to work here quickly. That work, kind of? So not for a moment did I think that I could come back to our college and say, you know, I've been working with AACC, and here's this wonderful thing, we've just got to do this and be able to lead the way. And they're going to say, you know, you're crazy. So what I did instead is I brought Kay McClinney to the campus, and that was probably one of the most important things that I did do. And then that was followed up by some workshops with Rob Johnstone. And so contained within all of this was really what's going to be my theme here was data. Very impressive data about where we are in terms of serving students and where maybe some of those gaps actually are. Now in terms of guided pathways, we're doing it flipped. Gosh darn, speaking of flipped. I better not go into the theater, I don't think. So leave it up to a scientist. All right, so a lot of colleges are seemingly ahead in some ways where they're already mapping their programs, the courses within the programs, and trying to do the narrowing that you're talking about, and leading that up to the meta major. Actually, we've just begun that process. But what we've done instead is that we've been working on all of the underpinnings. And for us, that has worked absolutely wonderfully because we can very slowly begin to fold in all of these different programs that in fact, each and individual program does support guided pathways. And some of them actually preceded guided pathways, and we were already headed down that way. So I was able then to match my experience with AACC to what I was seeing the faculty already doing, and then to be able to provide stipends and reassign time and focusing resources in that direction so that they could really do that good work and make that happen. So providing that support is critically important. But what was key? Okay, what is absolutely, can I grab that real quick? There we go. Let's see if it's green. Is it green? Yeah, okay. Oh, it's already up there. Okay. So I would say one of the most important places to put your resources is in a robust research department. I remember back when we had just one researcher. In fact, the duties were research planning and grants, and that person was expected to produce our very first strategic plan. You know, it's just way too much, way too thin to be very effective. So it became very clear that in order for us to move forward, we literally had to be extremely data-driven and to be able to convince anything that this particular direction was worth our time and worth our resources. So you can see here what we have today, and there's an important part of this, and that the blue portions are those that are general funded, and then the green is categorical. So what we've been able to do as we're moving forward with this is to begin to fold in some of the resources that have also come along, thankfully, from the State Chancellor's Office and SSSP and our SEP and Basic Skills and a number of the other, and now Strong Workforce, which will be very helpful to continue the funding that we're doing. So what is the effect of that? Let's just look quickly here. Here are the things, just a short list of some of the things that this dynamic team are able to address for us. And as you read through these, each and every one of them can be tied back as a foundation to guided pathways. Whether it's guiding our pathway by itself or going all the way to our early college program, where in fact for the last 6 years we've been graduating just from one high school about 39 students that will in 2 weeks go get their high school diploma. And so that's all working beautifully. Working a lot better than my microphone, apparently. Okay. But then to add to this, we also, in our district services, one thing I think is very important is we have a decentralized technology environment. So we do have a district technology. We also have colleges. Our two colleges have our own IT staff. That's important because we can then develop any of the different software. We can do programming, and we can pull that together to help support some of this work. But at the district, which serves both colleges, Saddleback College and Irvine Valley College, they have developed a thing called Sherpa, and you know what a Sherpa does, help you get up the hill there. It's a mechanism by where students can help find their courses, and it has a shopping cart, and it makes suggestions for courses that they may want to take in order to meet their goals. It has yet to be then focused on guided pathways yet, because we haven't done the mapping work yet. But when that is done, that can be tied back to that. They've also developed a thing called My Academic Plan, and I think you probably have heard about both of those products. They're very powerful for our students. Now, digging into some of this, looks like it went red. I had it blue here for Irvine Valley College. It looks like it's red for Bakersfield.
That's the BC way.
It is blue. It really is blue here. That's quite a trick. Does that automatically happen in your technology system?
Yeah.
It's your PowerPoint layout.
All right. So this is a very complicated slide here, but I wanted to just tell you a couple of things. I'm going to hold my ear here and do this. Looks silly, but that's the way it goes. If you take a look at the bottom, just the totals there, and look at the percent total, the numbers of students that are actually flowing through our multiple measures assessment. So we have, nearly 2,000 in both English and math at this particular point in time for our spring 2017 period. So we're getting a lot of engagement within this. But some data that's not up here that I need to tell you is the result of this work. We used to place in transfer level English 33%. We're now placing 66% successfully. And then for math, it used to be 38%. 38% in math has now increased to 61%. So we can see that this is a very effective process. Then moving to the next one here that again our research department is responsible for helping us with is our accelerated remedial English and mathematics. And this particular slide, which is, yes, it is red too, is talking about the passing rate for writing 1. And so when you look at these three curves here, you have the lower one in blue, which is 2 levels below, and we have our accelerated, which is the red line, and then 1 level below is green. So it really shows the success in that Writing 1 program that our accelerated actually moves our students right up equal to the success rate in 1 level below, and it's going to even go above that eventually here. Then, as we move on through some of this, we have our needed support for the accelerated math and English, and so you can take a look there and see the kinds of things that we did actually add additional resources to one way or the other, whether it was engaging faculty through stipends and reassigned time or providing actually classified staff to help with each of these. But through curriculum, counseling, of course, has probably doubled just over the last few years because this is such a wonderful project, and I haven't seen one in my 25-year career that actually matches and blends student services with the instructional side of the house so well. It can't happen separately. It has to happen together, and that's one great outcome from this. And so using then the basic skills, triple SP, and a minimal amount of general fund now, because we have these dollars, it's just a matter of making sure that they match and align with our objectives for guided pathways, and so the resources can go in that direction. Then, of course, leading from the middle, ours is called Extremely Early Student Intervention. Now, this has a technology component too, so this is another area where we have made investments in our technology environment. And this is both at the college level and also equally at the district level, because it has predictive analytics in it. So we're in the process of trying to do the best we can to identify just those students that need our help the most. And when we do that, then we begin to look at targeted interventions. And so looking at that data then, which is my last slide here, I think that's it. So we use a thing called nudges. So we're going to push out through our technology indications that the student needs help and different avenues that they can take to get the help. So with 259 nudges were sent out to 151 students. 35% of those were positive. It indicated that 17% of them actually required a little bit more deep intervention to help them out. And many of these, of course, the indicators are absences and missing assignments and quizzes, as you can read there. And so we continue to increase the number of nudges and begin to help our students with that. So there are two parts to my story then, is that make sure you have a very robust research department. You just can't get the information that you need to do this work without it. And then to support the technology behind it so that you can be able to technologically reach the students in an effective way. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I want to start by saying this has been an amazing, amazing day, and I think we owe such a thanks to all the staff. Everybody here has been so wonderful. Every time we turn around, there's more food. There's somebody's helping you out, and I just think it's been fabulous. I'm going to speak from the perspective of the trustee, and I want you to think of the trustee's voice and the trustee's time as a resource, and think of ways that you can utilize your trustees in a positive way. And I'm going to share some of the things that we're doing at Glendale College. First of all, I want to say I'm a little bit of a Johnny-come-lately to guided pathways. My first experience with it was when I saw it in the governor's budget. And I have a feeling that's not particularly different for a lot of trustees across the state. So you need to be patient with us and give us lots of training so that we can be on board with all of you. And I want to say from my perspective, I believe the important piece of a trusteeship is obviously the hiring of the CEO and keeping the budget together and all those things, but supporting the college's agenda in this Guided Pathways project and assisting the CEO and staff move it forward. And I think that's a lot of my comments are in that vein. And I want to talk about 4 different areas. One is leadership matters, agenda and board requests and reports matter, data matters, and sharing matters. So leadership, I was asked to kind of share my path to leadership. And I'll just tell part of it, but I was the director of the foundation at Glendale Community College and marketing and et cetera for a number of years, and we had a wonderful donor that gave us $1 million for a building. And after I'd been retired for a little while, we went out to lunch, and he looked at me, he says, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, someone suggested I might run for trustee." And he said, "If you do that, I'll give you $1,000 for your campaign." And that's where I went. And I'm about to start my 3rd term. And in addition to that, I got involved on the state level with the CCCT. And I am now the chair of the CCCT, which, just let me stop for a minute. I don't know if everybody knows what the CCCT is. It's a community college, a California Community College Trustees Association, and it's a policy board of the Community College League of California. There's a CEO policy board and a trustee board. So moving on here about how, I do want to say that about leadership. All of you, I'm sure, have experiences like I did, that somebody had a lot of faith in you, and maybe you didn't even realize it yourself, but somebody said to you, you are going to be a leader. In fact, I heard somebody say they were actually dragged into the leadership earlier in the day. And so keep your ear to the bridge table, as I always say, because there are people out there that believe in you, and you are all the leaders that are going to make these things happen on your campuses. Agendas and board requests and reports matter. Questioning and asking questions of the staff and faculty is an important part of being a board member, but not interrogating them, asking them in a way that it makes it easy for them to answer, because you really want the information. You're not trying to interrogate them. For your board, have a board goal along the way of pathways. An example is provide support and oversight of your district's efforts to implement the guided pathway model. Now that might be in the beginning, and those of you that are way beyond just the beginning probably then begin to have measures into terms of, you know, what you want your outcomes to be. Excuse me. As a board member, you have opportunity to support staff and with your trustee reports. You can congratulate and support what staff is doing. We have reports that we have written in our agenda, and we have reports that we make verbally. And that's a good time to let people know that you appreciate what they're doing and how things are moving along well. Support funds that needed to be used for guided pathways. An example is technology along the area of counseling and various different technologies. Although we've heard, I guess today, that some of that technology is coming from the Chancellor's office, so we need to hold off on buying it. I guess that's what I heard. And then I've asked our staff and faculty, or the people in charge of the guided pathways, to place information report each month on the board agenda. So every month we'll keep it in front of us, and we'll be aware of what's happening and keeping things moving along. And you might ask your you might give your board members a copy of this, Redesigning America's Community Colleges. All of our board members got one, and it's a good way to keep us and get us better informed. And then asking questions. And I think some of you received this. It was in the packet that you got. And these are 3 good questions that you can give your trustees that they can ask. And I want to give credit to Dr. Michael Ritter-Brown, who's the Vice President of Instructional Services at Glendale Community College, for helping me with these. And each of these questions is designed to give the person that's making the report information about the process and what's happening. The first one is, what is the urgency for initiating a guided pathways program now? And we heard about urgencies earlier. What are the benefits to students of a guided pathway approach? And what resources are necessary in adopting a guided pathway program? And under each one of those, I think you'll have a chance to look at it yourself and see how they can be responded, and that information can not only be given to the board, but in our case, we're televised, and I bet a lot of you, it gives that information also to the community. And then we've talked about data, and of course data matters to the board also, and just echoing Bill McGinnis's comments, you probably don't want to give us anything too complicated. You might make it easy for us to see. And some of the things that we might, we are asking at our colleges for graduation and transfer rates for 2- and 3-year cohorts instead of, we always get the 6-year cohorts, but tightening that up. You might want to know about dual enrollment figures as we think about pathways from the high schools, K-12 partnerships, and have staff share student success stories. And I think we saw some student success stories. And I think, again, that humanizes it and personalizes the experience. And it's good for our community to hear those stories. And then sharing matters. This is something, again, the board members have the opportunity to do. Providing information to the community, maybe going to the service clubs and other opportunities that you can share about guided pathways, just sharing with your peers also, because this is a new way of looking at what your community college is going to do and helping the community support your college. And I just want to share that at the CCCT, one of my goals this year is to keep all of us informed and on the path of guided pathways. And we're going to, each one of our meetings, have somebody from our group give a report on what's happening on their campus. And of course, we'll continue to follow funding and legislation. So if you're a trustee, I don't know if there are even any trustees. Are there any trustees here? I wondered if there would be. But anyway, you can share this with your trustees. And remember that the trustees' time and their energy is a resource, and use it prudently. The trustee's voice is another resource, and use it wisely. And remember, as trustees, we only have this much of our lives in this. You guys have 100% of your lives in it, and so be patient with us. Thank you.
Jennifer?
So, good afternoon. I am the final speaker for the day, so I have that privilege of you thinking about, and in that vein and context, I am going to keep checking my phone and try to stay within my 10-minute limit. And so I just have a few moments to share how Bakersfield College has envisioned and repurposed resources. I'm a faculty member here, and what I was tasked with was, from a faculty perspective, what have you seen in terms of, and how would you address this topic of realigning and re-envisioning our resources? So Bakersfield College is doing many, many, many great things. And it became very difficult to think about in 10 minutes, how do you capitalize or summarize what we've been doing? So I just chose to share a few examples in an effort to try to provide context in terms of, you have an initiative, we've been talking guided pathways, what have we done that has allowed us to start with pilot projects and then take them to scale? And what do they look like once they came to scale? So I'm going to give about 4 examples of pilot projects taking them to scale, and close with a specific example of change as it was focused on changing the way a committee does work. So my first example of our leveraging resources and or supporting sustainable change started back with our Making It Happen program. We called it MIH. And this program incorporated the concepts of faculty to student mentoring. It incorporated high touch, reaching out, staying connected with these students, and a number of other early interventions with the focus of getting the students on the path. So this does predate guided pathways as they're structured now, but it still was a focus of BC recognizing that we had an issue with getting our students actually to come to college and to stay here. It became a pilot for multiple measures in that as they developed MIH, they started to say, well, are the students entering the path at the correct spot? And what would that look like if we wanted to change how they entered the path? And what would that look like structurally and in our systems and through our processes? So using the MIH cohort, we were able to learn the lessons that allowed us to resolve any problems prior to taking multiple measures to scale. It informed many subsequent programs, including the development of our Kern Promise, and our Kern Promise focuses on ensuring students are placed in the right courses. So that is our Getting on the Path, Guided Pathways focus. Another example of leveraging the resources came out of our C6 grant. And this grant, usually I hear from faculty. It was a tongue-in-cheek labor of love as a Department of Labor TACT grant that was awarded to a C6 consortium. And that consortium, C6 stands for Central California Community Colleges Committed to Change. And it encompassed community colleges from Bakersfield all the way up to San Joaquin Delta, coming together and developing work plans, having very specific goals and objectives. But it really started to set the stage about really leveraging that resources. That is one of the first times where I really began to wrap my head around what does that mean and what does that look like. The work included improving student retention by contextualizing and embedding basic skills into CTE programs. So we used a train-the-trainer type of a model. Our basic skills faculty, who are experts in some of the strategies and embedding these strategies into courses, as well as contextualizing English and math and various other components of the educational process. They were able to teach CTE faculty specifically and work with us on how do we embed this in your courses, and then we monitored student success. The ultimate goal was to improve student retention. Today, most of our CTE programs have continued to use these strategies, things like reading apprenticeship, activities such as contextualizing math specific for welding students, using those problems that they can relate to. As the successes and best practices have been shared, Additional programs have adopted and expanded the strategies, which takes us to a staying on the path focus. As predating guided pathways, we were there, keeping our students on the path. I don't want to forget the strong workforce recommendations and funding as a current example of aligning resources. So C6 really was something we started with CTE programs that really is a conversation starter in many different areas about if you're having this problem, have you thought about contextualizing? Have you thought about embedding this? Don't make the students do an additional thing. What can you do in class that will help the students be successful? Strong workforce, again, is one of our most recent funding sources that we can leverage and align to support the entire community. The partnerships between industry and education has shared goals through the strong workforce, some of which include collaborating to ensure student success and completion of their goals, not only educational goals, but it might be a skills builder or just a skill attainment or a certificate of achievement as part of their goals. Strong Workforce has the shared goal of focusing on developing industry-supported programs that lead to jobs with a living wage. That, I think, is a key phrase. We often have our students that say, the end in mind, we say keeping the end in mind, and the end is that we come to college to get an education or a skill so that we can enter the workforce. And sometimes those jobs, if we look at our poverty levels, do not provide a living wage. So our students do not gain that upward mobility. And so we have to keep a living wage in mind. We also have the shared goal with Strong Workforce to provide opportunities to develop the skills to meet the needs of workforce. So it's that collaboration and that discussion that happens that when we think about internships, you have a collaborative relationship where you can go to your industry partner and say, you know, we have this program. Are you able to provide an opportunity for our student to develop the skill set and be able to enter your workforce with the skills that you desire? So this is one of those leveraging of funds. Strong Workforce is often being tapped as, hey, we would like to do this, can you fund us? And we go back to the shared goals, and there are very few things that they cannot fund. Leveraging of resources, keeping the end in mind. And my final example of taking our resources to scale is in thinking about our professional development institutes, and it was touched on just a minute ago briefly. When we think about our professional development institutes, we started with a small pilot back in 2015. The focus was how to get our adjunct engaged. We paid them. We used SSSP monies to do that. And I will fast forward to the institute that we had last week. I'm losing track of time. Last week, we have institutionalized our institutes. We provide flex as an opportunity, so it's not just a monetary support, but you can choose one or the other. We also have opened it up to these institutes being collaborative between faculty, staff, classified staff, administrators. We invite students. Our student peer mentors are present, students that work in our Welcome Center, in trying to make a truly cohesive and collaborative community. And that particular institute had a focus of working on the work of our completion coaching teams. And those teams are starting to be tasked with the development of that first 12 to 15 experience, where we have 12 to 15 units that would incorporate an exploratory course, summer bridge, a course in the student's major of study, as well as that English or math in that first pretty much year of college education. And the exploratory course or discovery course allows the student to explore all of the programs within a pathway. So they're not stuck. And we've been very intentional in creating educational plans that allow a student to take those courses, change their program of study if you wanted to be an accountant and now you kind of want to move into business management without losing time. So that's really our focus as we look at our completion teams. And it's such an interdisciplinary collaborative group. We talk about how do we keep our students here and measure our success. It's looking at all of those structures and processes that will make that process successful. So it's extremely important that we are integrated and we continue that work. But that's our professional development institutes that we now don't just offer at summer. We offer one in the winter, right after the fall semester ends. And we've moved to offering completion coaching breakfasts that are funded with categorical funds that allow us to do the work. And I see this particular time of investment, this investment being a reallocation of funds focused on time. We sometimes think that the resource is money, but we need to acknowledge that we have a resource of time. And our faculty often say, if I had more time, I just need some time to get the work done. So that becomes the focus of what our professional development workshops are and our institutes, is to provide the time to get the work done. My second example was to provide, my second task, so to speak, was to provide an example of a repurposing of committee work. And I am also the curriculum co-chair, and so I take this particular task to heart in that I opened my mouth and made a comment. Bakersfield College is not unique in terms of the numbers of committees we convene. I think many of you probably could identify with the committees are us kind of a mentality. But we also recognize the importance of many of those committees and their governance structure and how they do provide valuable relational information and data and support as we operate our institutions. Our curriculum committee, I was hearing students say, I just can't find anything in the catalog. Anybody ever heard students say that? No. I couldn't find stuff in the catalog. So with guided pathways in mind, and I knew what I was looking for, thinking about students and looking at the students' perspective, listening to what our students are saying, what is wrong with the catalog, and what could we do to make the catalog more student-friendly from the students' perspectives. We conducted focus groups. We talked to faculty. We came with our own experiences. We tried to invite students to be involved. They were not present, but the focus groups gave us information that basically said, if you would think about changing the layout in the print catalog, that might help us. Our catalog was structured where we had all of our programs, and I've seen many looking this way. You have ADTs, then you have programs of study that are your local degrees, and then you go to courses. And the courses are separate, but they're part of the degree. So if I wanted to be this and I wanted to know what the course description was for a specific major, I had to flip 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 pages, alphabetized hopefully, in a thoughtful manner that really was alphabetized, and find that course that gave me the course description to make a decision. So our first phase of redesigning the layout of our catalog is we took all of the programs of study, ADTs, local degrees, and put all degrees together with the intent of moving all of the courses associated with that degree immediately following the degree. So if you are on an electronic device and you are swiping, hopefully you are 3 or 4 swipes away from your course description versus 20, and then it shuts off because you actually hit the wrong button and you hit backspace and all of those other things that happen. So we will, it is now ready for the Board of Trustees. That is phase 1. We came up upon a glitch, so this is always a learning opportunity. And the glitch happened to be where our program was not going to allow us to actually put all those courses where we wanted them. Phase 2. There's always phase 2. So as we think about these changes, it was a very intentional change of committee work that focused on the pillar of clarifying the path for our students. I'll take the clicker. So in summary, I have just 2 slides. And my slides, I think, this slide represents all of your initiatives. And I hear a whoa. And you probably can find all of your initiatives too. If we're going to put this in context of repurposing, realigning the work that we do, not adding another initiative, but doing our work differently along the organizing framework of guided pathways using the pillars, it could look something like this. And I have often thought about, as we are looking at organizing the way the students see the work, we should also reorganize the way we see the work. And we can use the same organizing framework. Oh, I forgot to push button. They're coming. Bakersfield College is doing things differently to maximize resources, creating a sustainable structure that serves our students. It's a great time to be at BC, and it's a great time to be a part of the California Community College system. Thank you.